مساء الخير. برحب بيكم معانا النهارده في نقاش مع دكتور ريتش فيلر والاستاذ معاذ بن حسين حول التطوير المهني وعلاقته بالمؤسسات والشركات وسوق العمل. Welcome Rich, welcome Muath. We're going to start with you, Rich, please. We have received a couple of questions, online questions. The first one goes for how does the career development affect corporation or corporate life and its employees?
I think corporations have begun to understand that unless you treat people more human and create a more human-centric workplace, you'll never get the best out of them. And the best out of them, I think, is a little bit to do with the motivations of corporations to profitize. And there's no question that we need talent to profitize. At the same time, we have to profitize society. Society has to also create citizens and families and potential of people to be good citizens. I'm sorry?
No, it's working.
I have to be closer. I apologize. I don't remember what I've said, so it could be dangerous. I think corporations have to recognize that they have to be more human-centric in the way they treat their workers. And we need to build workplaces that get the best out of people, not only in their ability to produce, but to engage their colleagues, to teach their colleagues, to support their colleagues who are going through transitions just as economies are.
دكتور ريتش بيوضح ان لو كل مؤسسه وشركه هتتعامل مع كل موظف ان هو انسان وان هو محور حياته في اسره وعيله وحياه اخرى او الحياه الخاصه او الحياه الشخصيه، فهيقدر المؤسسه او الشركه تقدر تطلع احسن ما موجود في هذا الموظف بناء على التعامل ان هو الانسان، تعامل الانسان.
I might say that I own 3 companies, and I've been very fortunate enough. And it's because other people who work for me have been able to maximize their talents to increase profits. At the same time, I've learned that unless we treat people as if they're brothers and sisters, they don't feel complete, and they have less reason to show up every day to give their best. At the same time, anyone who takes a risk to start a business, and we've lost lots of money, my wife and I, in real estate and other issues, we found that we have to take risks, so you expect to be rewarded. But all of that means we have to basically be our best and create the best people and communities and support systems so that we all feel full and rewarded and nourished.
Dr. Rich, I agree with you 100%. But there is always a counter argument to that. They would say that if you give your employees this kind of freedom and treatment, they will rebel against you or use this and their benefits and harm the company. So what do you say about that?
Again, I think everything is a risk. There's always a secondary consequence. And we have lost money many times because we didn't find employees to bring back what we hope we gave them. On the other hand, there are some companies that make a tremendous amount of wealth off of labor and don't share it with their employees. My son had worked for one of the largest corporations in America. And when he tells me about their profit margin, it doesn't quite feel fair. And I look at many of you who work in NGOs and try to make a living and recognize you also have to support your families. So it is constantly a trade-off between basically, in many ways, efficiency versus community. And I think James O'Toole said it well, we all live at a time of creative tension. We have liberty, and we have the whole notion of competition in a way. And then we have a whole notion of community versus efficiency. So there are natural tensions we all need to experience. Education helps us understand those natural tensions.
مبدأ التعامل الإنساني مع الموظف أو إن هو إنسان ده هيوصل لهذا الموظف إن هو يؤدي بكفاءة عالية، وبالتالي المؤسسة أو الشركة هتقدر تنجح وتعمل شغل أحسن وأحسن أو إنتاجية أفضل للشركة أو المؤسسة ككل. أستاذ معاذ عارض دكتور ريتش وقال له ولكن في مبدأ بيقول إن إحنا لو خلينا كل الموظفين مرتاحين طول الوقت فبالتالي هيبقى فيه شويه الموظفين هيفرطوا يعني من الاخر يعني للاسف مش هيبقى عندهم انتاجيه وهيبقوا كسالى وهيبقى عندهم عدم انتاجيه.
انا ما قلتش كده، انا قلت انا متفق معاه بس في ناس يقولوا كده.
طيب انا بحاول اشرح بس اللي انت قلته. رد دكتور ريتش عليه وقال ان طبعا كل مبدا ليه العواقب السلبيه بتاعته، ومحتمل ان يحصل كده بالفعل ان بعض الموظفين في بعض المؤسسات لو انتاجيتهم قلت نتيجه ان الشركه او المؤسسه مريحاهم زياده، ده هنعتبره ان هو هنقول مش استثناء ولكن مش عارفه هنقول ايه، حالات خاصه. Then we go back to you again, Dr. Rich, okay? Not or a very minor percentage of corporations, they are focusing on adapting green development into their systems. Why is that?
I think they've done it, but maybe didn't call it career development. My colleague Brian yesterday, I think, did an amazing job of synthesizing his experiences to make really good examples of specific questions. And what he said that really stuck with me is we need language that's universally understood. For years, corporations gave lots of training to their top management and very little to the workers who were in management. Very often, they gave EAPs, or abilities to go back to school for top management, not for their workers. And I think, again, we don't have common language to explain what career development is. Often, we'll spend very large amounts of money to provide coaching to executives, but not to workers. So I think in any country, any word is dangerous unless it has a definition to it. So when we think about corporations, that's a different set of questions than a small business person or a smaller company. So I think I'm optimistic in what I read about companies seeing the value of people and how they have to invest with them. Where they formally invested in tools and technology, we recognize without the ability to innovate and be creative and empathize, the technology doesn't grow to accommodate and appreciate the needs of other cultures.
السؤال كان لدكتور ريتش، لماذا لا تركز الشركات على التطوير المهني او نسبه ضئيله جدا من الشركات والمؤسسات بتتبنى هذا المبدا التطوير المهني جوه سيستم او جوه الانظمه بتاعتها؟ وكان رده ان بالعكس هو شايف ان ربما يكون التطوير المهني موجود بالفعل جوه الشركات او جوه الحاله العمليه، ولكن التعريف بتاعه او المسمى كتطوير مهني مختلف من مكان لاخر. وذكر برضو كمان ان مش من العدل ان يتم توجيه او ارشاد الاداره العليا ونسيب الموظفين، لابد من وجود مبدا موحد عادل لتوفير التطوير المهني او هنقول عليه كوتشنج الارشاد والتوجيه لجميع من يعمل بالمؤسسه. Muath, will you tell us please career development application and implementation in corporation life in Saudi Arabia?
بالعربي؟
بالعربي، اوكي ممكن؟ طيب تمام. سؤالي ليك مرة تانية، احنا عايزين نعرف تطبيق التطوير المهني في المملكة العربية السعودية على الشركات والمؤسسات والهيئات، ايه حجمه وتأثيره ووصلت لغاية فين دلوقتي؟
يعطيك العافية أستاذ رندا. بالنسبة للتطبيق يعني التطوير المهني في الشركات والمؤسسات، نحن مرينا على بعض الحالات اللي فعلا هم مهتموا بهذا المجال. نحن شركتنا معروف ان هي تنفذ هذه الخدمات بالنسبه للشركات، انه ننفذ التطوير المهني في المؤسسات والشركات عندهم. في بعض الشركات فعلا تبدا اهتمام وننطلق معاهم، في بعض الشركات يعني تبدا تتكلم معنا كذا في البدايات وبعدين يوصل مرحله انهم ما يستوعبوا او يفهموا ايش معنى التطوير المهني، فبالتالي ينسحبوا. في شركات صراحه مهتمه بهذا الشيء، وبعضها تكون من مبدا اللي مبدا عائلي. يعني الشركات العائليه في المملكه العربيه السعوديه تحرص انها تعد القاده او الجيل الثاني او الجيل الثالث من العائله انه يمسك الشركه. الشركات العائليه في المملكه العربيه السعوديه كثيره جدا، يعني حتى ربما في بعضها تعرفوها انتم، يعني سمعتوا عنها. كثير جدا الشركات العائليه، فكثير منهم يستخدموا مبدا التطوير المهني لاعداد الجيل الثاني والثالث عشان يصيروا قاده ويمسكوا الشركات فيما بعد الجيل الاول والثاني بعد التقاعد او ما الى ذلك. التطبيق محدود، لكن اللي يصير انه في بعض المدراء في بعض الشركات يحرص انه موظفينه ياخذوا هذه الخدمه، يكون شخص هو استفاد من خدمات التطوير المهني. يعني بالنسبه لنا احنا الاشخاص اللي يعتبروا سفراء للتطوير المهني في الشركات والمنظمات في المملكه العربيه السعوديه هم اشخاص استفادوا من هذه الخدمات اولا، ثم بعد ذلك يعني يحاولوا انهم ينشروها في شركاتهم ومؤسساتهم، يتعاملوا معنا او يتعاملوا مع جهات اخرى بهذا الشان. الحالات يعني معظمها كانت شركات عائليه وحتى ممكن جمعيات اهليه. الجمعيات الاهليه يستخدم التطوير المهني لموظفينهم، لكن ايضا بالاضافه الى ذلك الى المستفيدين من هذه الجمعيات. يعني في جمعيه النهضه الخيريه النسائيه في المملكه العربيه السعوديه من الشركات اللي فعلا قاعده تعد ابناء وبنات الاسر المستفيده من الجمعيه انهم يستفيدوا من التطوير المهني في برامج متعدده، واحد البرامج هو برنامج مستقبلي موجود فيه انهم يعدوا الاشخاص يعني في التطوير المهني. فبدا الانتشار والتوسع في هذا المجال، لكن خلينا نقول انه ما هو موجود في كل شركه، لكن اتفق مع دكتور ريتش لما قال انه موجود بشكل او باخر في بعض الشركات، لكن ربما نسبه القبول ما هي جدا عاليه كما هو متوقع. In conclusion, I said that some organizations are starting to adapt the career development in their organization, especially family businesses, because they want to prepare for the second generation, third generation to take the leadership after the first or the owner or the founder of the company. So they are eager to apply career development concept for their families, and also some other companies where we have what we call some ambassadors. So you have a manager or director who benefited from career development in some way, and he wanted to share these benefits with their employees, so they work as ambassadors in their organization to promote or adapt career development within their teams. Also, social organization like Nahda Society, for example, they adapted career development for their employees, but also for their beneficiaries. So because they support some families in Saudi Arabia, so they wanted also to apply the career development concept in their supported families or beneficiaries, supporting their sons and daughters and these kind of things. So this is what is happening in Saudi Arabia. بالنسبة للأجهزة الحكومية في عندنا بعض الجهات الحكومية فعلا اللي تدعم التطوير المهني، لكن أكثرها إنه للمستفيدين الأشخاص المستفيدين من المجتمع أكثر من إنه والله ينفذوها داخليا عندهم في منظماتهم كوسيلة لطريقة إدارة الموظفين أو أداء الموظفين.
Another question, سؤال تاني.
Yeah, but even that is not that common. That's what I'm saying. Even that's not that common.
في سؤال؟
اوكي. طيب هو سؤالك جدا حلو، بس انا افضل انك ممكن نتكلم هناك في البوث، نتكلم عن برامجنا اكثر، نتكلم بشكل عام. نحن قد خدمات التطوير المهني نحن نبدا فيها من معرفه الذات، استكشاف نقاط القوه والضعف، الميول والاهتمامات والانماط والرغبات والاحتياجات اللي الاستاذ احمد كلها تكلم عنها امس. فنبدا بمعرفه استكشاف الذات، ثم بعد ذلك نبدا نمشي مع هذول الاشخاص في رحله تطويرهم، انهم كيف يعني تعيين يعني كل شخص في الفاميليز ايش ممكن هذا الشخص او ايش البوتنشل او ايش الامكانيات ممكن يوصلها في الشركه نفسها. فيصير في رسم خطه انه هذا الشخص ايش ممكن المناصب اللي يمسكها في الشركه، ويتم وضع خطه بالنسبه لهذا الشخص وكيف يوصلها، ويتم المتابعه معه بناء على شخصيته، بناء على اهتماماته، بناء على انماطه او مع ذلك. فكل شخص في العائله حيتم وضع له برنامج. طبعا البرنامج هذا مش انه والله صارم لازم نمشي عليه، لا، في نوع من انواع المرونه والفلكسبيتي انه يتغير بعد فتره. حتى ممكن بعضهم يقول لك والله انا ما بشتغل في الفاميلي، I don't want to work in the family business, I want to go out. فيصير كذا نقاشات متنوعه متعدده، ما هو شيء محدد، بناء على كل عائله وبناء على كل فرد وبناء على كل شخص.
I could just make one comment. Because we are all here as individuals, to what degree can you look at yourself as your own company? And do you invest in your own learning? Do you invest in your own self-care? Do you invest in the long term as well as the short term? And those questions seem critical to companies or corporations, but we also have to ask those questions. If we are dependent on other people to take care of us, we probably are going to have a difficult challenge, just as corporations who have to be dependent upon government support or some other systems. At the same time, none of us can be independent. We need community and support. And corporations have to find a way to build their own community internally to find nourishment and support and a possibility of growth. So to put this down to our individual level, how are you learning? How are you investing in your own growth? How do you take care of your own self? And how do you think long term as well as short term? That's the challenge I have for my own family, for my own aging, and for my own son. Not unlike, I think, what corporations are.
Then we go for the next question, Dr. Rich. Back to individuals and employees. Well, how can an employee or an individual create ideas, creative ideas to develop the job? Develop his job or his career.
Yeah.
Let's say it's his career now.
Great question. Personality matters. Some people are more creative, take more risks, are willing to speak out. And some people less so. So there's variability within any one employee in how they can influence their own job. At the same time, we're trying to teach people to be called job craft, to work within their own job to make it pull upon more of their own natural assets and try to get their manager to let them do what they do best. So to break up their job into pieces to maximize what they naturally show up as being strong in. So job crafting is one place.
Give us an example of job crafting.
So I was working with the Denver, near myself, with their zoo. And all of their employees out at the front desk had the same job title and did the same thing repetitively. And we tried to say, you're treating everyone as if they're all equal. And they're not, because some people had different strengths. So we talked about looking at the tasks that had to be done and try to recraft their jobs so that they could do more of what they do best and feel better about it. Because when you and I are doing which comes natural, it feels like we're in flow, and we feel most alive and not looking at our clock, that's the goal. So if we can find out what you most love to do and what you most love to do, and maybe swap some of those behaviors, both of you are happy. We probably get a better result. And you're more engaged every morning that you come. That's a simple idea. But I think large companies and corporations are trying to think about how do we shift to get the maximum of the individuals at this table and get our needs.
السؤال كان كيف يمكن للموظف خلق أفكار إبداعية لتطوير عمله؟ دكتور ريتش ذكر إن لو كل شخص بيشتغل أو بيعمل وظيفة هو بيحبها فهتبقى الإنتاجية بتاعته أفضل وأفضل وأفضل، وبالتالي الشركة اللي بيعمل بيها هتقدر تكون مستفيدة من الموظف ده. ومن الحياة العملية في حاجة اسمها جوب كرافتنج، وده معناه إن بما إن الوظيفة هي عبارة عن مهام مع بعضها فتعمل وظيفة، ليه ما يكونش المهمات اللي أنا بحبها أشتغلها وزميلي أو زميلتي تعمل مهام معينة برضه بتحبها، مش بس اللقب بتاع الوظيفة أو نوع الوظيفة أو مكان العمل، لا، المهام اللي بتكون في الآخر الوظيفة نفسها. Muath, would you like to add, build on about how an employee would create or have some ideas to develop his career?
I cannot copy what Dr. Rich said. I have nothing to add, honestly.
Would you like to give us an example of the real life in KSA, like
Tough questions, Randa, tough questions.
No.
Dr. Rich nailed everything in that question.
Okay.
I have a question. Please. Hi. Just building on the previous question, that it is based personality and to make sure that he or she does what he prefers. But let me go back from the institution point of view. Should I, if I'm in charge of an institution, should I look for development of each person individually, or from the holistic point of view, from the institution point of view? I mean, I don't want any complications of being institutional, but I keep thinking, am I developing everybody's specific job, or am I leading them to find their own ways for career development also?
If I understand correctly, we have to focus on outcomes. You are accountable. There are metrics you're asked to create. That often is not understood by your employees. And only when they understand the outcomes can they begin to understand how they can adapt or accommodate their best assets to meet those. I'm not suggesting we can focus our businesses in trying to meet all your needs in career development so that you become an independent, happy warrior. I'm not suggesting. Organizations have metrics and outcomes. But I know that these 5 gentlemen right here, if we agree upon the outcomes, the gentleman on this side may do something much better than the person over this side because he's wonderfully different than the other person. Without talking about outcomes and for workers to understand the outcomes, I think we're playing in silence. Our employees have to know what our metrics are, what are our goals. It's easy to say, know your why. That's a very common, popular, know your why. Well, there's a why for an individual, but there are also whys for organizations. And when the two of them meet, that's where we see great progress. Because this team of men right here feel like they come to work for a reason, not just for their why, but also for the why of the organization that pays them to support their families. I don't think it's an either or, it's asking a bigger question. What are the metrics, and can you clarify them to me as an employee? And what can I ask of you to get the best out of you to not only help me meet those objectives, but for me to help you lead, feeling you're a better person having worked with me. At the end of the conference session yesterday, I said, employers have to ask, do I have my workers leaving better than they came? Am I giving them at least as much as I'm taking? And when I see companies who are taking more than they're giving back to their workplaces, they're not going to get the best from their workers. When I see in some situations where, I'll be very frank, I was a tenured professor. And the challenge with tenure is we couldn't ask some things of tenured professors because they had an entitlement. When they better understood how valuable they were to a larger outcome, I found they bought in much easier because they felt they valued and what they did value to a larger cause. It's when people don't know that they're valued or what they do is valued, why would they come to work?
Question?
Yeah.
I have another question here.
Firstly, I want to thank all organization for this conference. Welcome here to Aswan, our leader. My question, from your opinion, when we can start career development service? When our youth go to the university, or from early period, we can start career development with parents, with child for the future. I think we can make more policy and national policy from the early age. This is my opinion for the career development. Also, another question, for me, I work as a professor, I work as a trainer. After yesterday session, I think if I can make new job in career development as to be a coach, what is this stage to be one of the leaders in this field? What is course I must take? What is the training I wish to learn? Thank you.
Very good question.
We should have started career development yesterday, and we need all of tomorrow to answer your question. I'm trying to answer that question in simple terms for myself. I find when I'm asked a question, I have to look at my own life first. And I've resolved that for me to navigate the future, I personally come up with something called heroic G mindset. And I'll try to explain that, if that's helpful. Because it makes me get up in the morning and have some clarity about how I want to be in the world. So heroic G is H-E-R-O-I-C. H-E-R-O-I-C, lowercase g. So whether you're talking about a young child you're working with or an employee in your organization, for me at 72 years old and looking at how little time he has left, for 3 different people. I first want to have some sense of hope. And hope is not a faith to me. Hope is really understanding that it's a way of thinking. I need to have a will that I can do something, and I have to have the resources or a way to do it. When either of those is missing, it's hard to have hope. So hope is one piece. I can teach my young grandchild, if I had one, about hope. That if you have a will, then you have a way to get there. If you don't have that ability to see that, you don't have hope. E is really this idea of efficacy. Do I believe that I can do something to meet my goals? If you don't believe you have the way to meet your goals, it's really difficult to take action. R is this notion of reframing. Every one of us has a choice about how we see any incident. So reframing is being able to see an experience from at least 3 different ways. We have all lost someone who we cared about who's died, right? We've all lost a parent. But not everyone recovers at the same rate. We reframe that loss over different times and with different experiences at different rates. So we have choices of how we reframe and see any incident. For clients, I try to say, tell me about 2 other people that are going through a loss or a divorce or an illness, and how did they recover? How did they reframe it? It gave them power back to see it differently. H-E-R-O. The O is this notion of optimism. And optimism is, are you a solution finder, or do you only see problems? If I'm someone who can see something bad, but see a potential solution out of it, that's optimism. H-E-R-O is called psychological capital. Fred Luthans should take all the credit, an author called Fred Luthans. He believed HERO, H-E-R-O, was a psychological capital that we have. We can teach that to people. We can teach that to your employees. I can teach that to my son. I'm trying to have psychological capital as I age. The I, H-E-R-O-I, is intentional exploration. I went to college to prolong my adolescence. I went to college to get 4 more years to learn how to grow up. Not a wonderful reason to go to college because it's very expensive. If I had to be intentional about why I went to college and what courses I took and which professors I took, if I was intentional, I would have had a much more better experience. So intentional is looking for the clues that tells me I should study this over that. Where's the evidence? Where are the clues? Intentionality. The C is my ability to be clear, clarity about who I am and what I want. Because when I'm not clear, I'm trying to fool you. I'm trying to lie to you. I'm trying to be something I'm not. I'm trying to be clear. So when I wake up in the morning, am I clear about my purpose and why I'm here and how I should be in the world? The other C is this notion of curiosity. Do I ask why? Why in the U.S. do we treat black people different than white people? Why in the U.S. do we treat people who have so much more money with more policies to keep the money than they ask how can they give to the community? So HEROIC is my way to try to navigate a lifetime of transitions. And I think that's helpful if I was trying to teach those concepts to young people, middle-aged people, or people my age. The G, lowercase g, gives attribution to a woman named Carol Dweck. At Stanford, we said, all of us have to think about, do I believe that I can learn? Or do I believe that I'm fixed? And I find myself getting trapped in, well, I'm 72, I'm fixed. And then I have coffee with a person an hour ago who's 20 years younger, and I get inspired by what he says, and I say, gosh, I can still grow that. So in my best way, before I can give advice to you, to say I try to think through, when I'm at my best and I navigate transitions, heroic G seems to help me find clarity about how to be.
Okay. No, let's complete the answer to the gentleman question, please. Now, the career development science can be applied on early years of kids, right? Correct. It's like 4 or 5 years, which is kindergarten stage, I believe.
Well, if you can think back to being 4, or if you have a child or a grandchild, what you hope is that they're in an environment where they feel some sense of mastery, that they feel what they do matters, that they're encouraged, that they're told they're very good at this. I like how you did this. I'm glad you're here. That's teaching someone to feel a sense of encouragement, a sense of mastery, a sense that they matter in the world. If a 4-year-old can feel that, that's going to help them learn how to read. It's going to help them to go home and feel they're part of a community, and that's why they're willing to clean up their room, or that's why they're willing to listen to the wisdom of their mother.
So career development can be applied as well for parents, right?
Ironically, I think many parents are watching what's happening to their children in school. And when they say good career development going on, they say, why didn't I get that?
And this.
They're also aware that they have often not received good career development practice in the companies they work in. So they go, why would you want to work and do what I do and have no soul at the end of the day? So you need more help to navigate the question of who you are and how do you act in the world. Good career development teaches us about ourselves, but also the reality of the systems we work in. Back to your question. There's the self and there's the system I have to be in. And the more we can know about both and try to align those seems to be the goal.
So since the gentleman has the interest of becoming a career coach, would you like to give him a piece of advice to be qualified, or what characteristics chosen for a person to be a career coach?
To be a career coach. If you heard Dr. Hutchinson yesterday, when Brian talked, I think he did the best example I've ever heard about understanding the context of career coaching in the world today. Career coaching is it's not a license. It's not overseen by a government. So it plays in an arena much like other occupations that are not standardized. There's not clinical supervision. There are not metrics you have to meet. It's a new profession. My wife is in the back of the room, and she's extremely competent as a physical therapist. And she'll come home and tell me about sports trainers. And they know how to do some of the activities, but don't understand the body. Yesterday, Dr. Brian talked about the power of counseling and psychotherapy and how much more they knew because they understood the cognitions and the ability of the brain to be powerful. Most coaches don't have that training. So we have a challenge that often people go to a coach because they heard that you help my son, you help my father, you help my brother. We go to people we know that are said to be good. And that's apparently what I see happening in the field. We don't know what their credentials mean. We go to someone because we heard they helped someone else out. I think that's the reality of coaching today. However, I think there's some amazing things going on where we're trying to break down the skills and competencies needed of a good coach, as well as acting with integrity and having a sense of a moral, ethical compass, which often collides with marketing and branding myself to make money. Because anybody can go out and be famous on the social network system and brand themselves, and they look large, but they don't really have the depth or the breadth of the competencies you're looking for. So in reality, I find coaches who are succeeding today are either working with executives that some company is probably paying for, and they have gone to a certain school or certain credential program, and it's recognized as excellent, but very, very expensive, which leaves everyone else out. So on the other hand, you find smaller, shorter programs that are trying to give people new skills so they can be better parents, be better managers, be better providers of people who come for career advice. But the range is tremendous in terms of the quality of those. I personally teach one for only 3 days plus a follow-up. I wish it was much longer. But I also know I'm trying to serve an audience that has fewer resources, less time, and they're just trying to learn some new skills. I've decided it's worth it for me to spend 3 days to try to give a credential to people who can have some basic kind of things and give them resources so they can continue to learn to get better. And if they will do that with integrity and ethics and recognize they have so much more to learn, I feel good about what I provide. On the other hand, there are programs out there for 1 hour and you get a credential. So I think there's some value in looking at how long someone has been doing this, because if you've done it a long time, there's some evidence that it has some staying power. Second thing is, what are the credentials of the people doing the training? Have they had more training, more supervision, more feedback? I think that's the second thing to think about. And the third is, ask people who have gone through the training, has it changed their behavior? I think that's the only way I can help people sort through all of the noise that is out there. Very honestly, there are people with PhDs that I would not send my child to, because they may not be healthy. But I could check where they went to school, I could check with their clients, I could ask them to say, tell me other people who have completed the training so I can call on them to get that service. So it asks you as a consumer to be an advocate, to find out what seems to be useful and helpful. Secondly, the community, and Brian said this yesterday so well, we have to tell people about what career development is, teach society about what coaching is, so that people raise their expectations of what they'll find. In addition, some managers go to get this training to be better managers. They may never serve as a coach, but they're a better manager who is a coach rather than a boss.
طبعا ردا على سؤال الاستاذ بالنسبه اتفضلي دكتور محمد اهلا وسهلا بحضرتك. علم التطوير المهني سهل تطبيقه جدا كعلم على الاطفال من سن بدايه من 4 ل 5 سنين، وده سن الحضانه، وطبعا تطبيقه في السنين اللي بعد كده زي سن الابتدائي او الاعدادي او الثانوي، ده طبعا بياخد شكل مختلف شويه بما يتناسب مع الفئه العمريه نفسها للشخص. وكان الدكتور محمد ابدى اهتمامه انه يقدر يحصل على اعتماد او يدرس دراسه علميه علشان يحصل على اعتماد كارير كوتش او الموجه المهني. وكان رد دكتور ريتش عليه ان بالفعل يقدر يعمل ده، وفي فرق كبير بالنسبه للكارير كوتشنج، كارير كونسلنج، وفي فرق لان في طرق علاجيه وفي دراسه عمليه وفي تطبيقات مختلفه. فطبعا الناس لازم تعرف احنا كاشخاص عاديين لما يجوا يسالوا المساعده من شخص ما لازم يبقوا عارفين الشخص ده هيقدر يوفر لهم ايه. طبعا في كلام كتير جدا هو قاله كنصيحه شخصيه وكخبره من الحياه العمليه، وهو عنده 72 سنه، وبيقول ان كل يوم الصبح لما بيصحى بيتبنى مبدا كم مبدا دكتور محمد قال عليه هيرويك جي. هيرويك جي الحروف من HERO ابريفيشن هي اختصارات بالفعل، هيرويك جي HEROIG. اتمنى ان احنا نقدر ناخد منه مره ثانيه كل حرف يعني ايه، وهنكتبها ونوزعها لحضراتكم لو نقدر. I couldn't explain heroic G actually in Arabic all in one. Yeah. So we are going to have from you write it down. It's recorded. Okay. So Another question, now it's for Muath. Are you there? Okay. Career development is applied in KSA for early age as well, for early years, for children. Its implementation in KSA is wide or vast? Schools?
My silence may answer this question, but in some organizations, yes. So the concept is there. الفكرة موجودة إنه تطبق. لكن the application itself is not very tangible, or is not. The application cannot be seen straight away, and well, I didn't have any statistics in that. ما عندي أي إحصائية أو دراسة عن الموضوع هذا، لكن من تجارب الأشخاص اللي إحنا مرينا فيهم والأشخاص اللي إحنا عاشرناهم وشفناهم في بعض الكونسبتس اللي موجود بطريقة نظرية، لكن التطبيق العملي الواضح بالنسبة له ما هو ربما يكون منتشر بشكل كبير. I don't have any statistics on that, but the theory are there, but the application may not be as we wish.
Yeah, perfect, yeah. توضح له حاجة باختصار أو حاجة.
Another question for Dr. Rich here. Would you like to suggest some exercises to support an individual to acquire emotional and psychological resilience along the track of pressure in his or her career, reaching their objectives or reaching their targets?
So can I offer some advice to help people have resilience?
Yeah.
And allow them to continue when they get vulnerable. This morning we played a game called Who You Are Matters. Is anyone there?
Make it closer.
This morning we played a game called Who You Are Matters, which a colleague and I tried to create a process which simulates a career coaching session. And we built in pieces of the game that tries to look like what happens in coaching. And I think some people were there this morning. Because we know we have to get these concepts out to scale. If we learn those things, we tend to have more emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence allows us, I think, to have a little more control over bad times, use that word. In addition, I think we have the gift of rethinking our experience to be more resilient. Much of my life, and maybe yours, I thought I was only worthy if I was liked. That's dangerous. Much of my life, I thought I was only valuable or having worth because you liked me. That's very dangerous. Because we can't feel okay about ourselves by what you think of me. I have to believe that I'm worthy because I'm alive. Much of my life, I thought the world should be fair, and I demanded it be fair. Fair, in many cases, is a value judgment, and the world is not always fair. But what I can do is not blame myself, but try to act upon it to make it more fair. And the third thing I often did is I blamed you when something didn't go right for me. And the blaming didn't really help improve the situation. So for me, resilience is trying to take a look at what I say to myself that doesn't get me closer to my goals, which asks me to save my energy to try to change an unjust system or something that has not worked for me or something that's not allowed me to move forward. So resilience is asking us to see something in different ways and try to take back some power or control so that I can move forward to act upon it or advocate for myself or advocate for change.
So, shall we adopt sort of exercise or sort of training or routine check over myself to acquire such resilient state?
I try to do that myself. And part of it is when I don't get what I want or I don't think you treated me fairly, or I don't feel like you like me. Those are three of the biggest issues I think that set us back. And what I'm trying to do in my own life is realize I don't need your approval. I won't always be treated fair. And when you hurt me, I'm less interested in blaming you than I am to try to move forward and hope that you learn different ways to act.
Would you like to go on?
No.
Sure. السؤال كان بيقول برجاء ذكر بعض التمارين التي تساعد الفرد على الصمود أمام الضغط النفسي، على الصمود ويبقى فيه مرونة نفسية أمام الضغط النفسي الذي يتعرض له أثناء معركته مع الوصول لأهدافه. وكان رد دكتور ريتش إن إزاي الواحد يكون عنده المرونة النفسية القوية. المفروض إن الواحد يكون عنده ذكاء عاطفي، ولو ما عنديش الذكاء العاطفي أحاول أكتشف ده، أكتشف نفسي وأكتشف المحيط بتاعي وأكتشف البيئة اللي أنا فيها وكيفية التعامل مع نفسي، مع أخطائي، مع مميزاتي، ومع الآخرين والمحيطة بيا. وبناء عليه لو في ذكاء عاطفي هقدر أتعامل مع الآخرين زي ما هقدر أتعامل مع نفسي. والمفروض إن هي مرحلة، هي مش مرحلة واحدة، هي مراحل مستمرة. طول ما أنا عايشة فأنا لازم دايما أبقى عندي المرونة النفسية دي. واقترح برضو إن لو في تمارين مخصصة فكل واحد لازم يبني نفسه التمارين المخصصة دي علشان يقدر يدرب نفسه على تقبل السلبيات، تقبل الظلم في بعض الأوقات، أو ربما يكون الشخص بيتبنى وجهات نظر خاطئة من الأساس. فلازم يكون في دايما انعكاس داخلي، هل أنا بفكر صح ولا لأ؟ هل أنا شايف الأمور بطريقة صحيحة ولا لأ؟ هل أنا فاهم نفسي وفاهم الآخرين ولا لأ؟ Now what about you, Muath? Now back to develop self-development, all right, and back to corporation life once again. What about your real life experience, about yourself, about Muath, and how self-development took place over the years with you?
First of all, Randa, this is none of these questions that I approved. You know?
That was my mistake to make you read my questions.
She trapped me into something, so thank you. I appreciate that. Well, let's say that career development for me it was ongoing journey, and still a journey that I'm going through until now. I think I will be through this journey until I don't know how long. Right? I think this ongoing journey that will never end for me, because every time I learn something new about myself, and every stage of my life there is something new that I learn about myself. For example, 10 years ago, I thought that I love writing, and I would write stories and novels and all these kind of things. And I thought, yeah, I like writing, and I'm good at writing. But then when I took the GCDF with Mr. Ahmed Mustafa, I reflected on my experience in writing, and I knew at that time, no, I don't like writing. Because whenever I write, it is only 15 minutes and I get tired. But why am I doing all these things? Why am I doing all these writings and I'm really good at writing? So I discovered, okay, I loved writing because I love receiving positive feedback. When people read my writings, I get positive feedback, so that is kind of reinforcement that built this habit into me. So that's something I discovered about myself 10 years after I had been doing the writing in since 2008 until 2012, so 4 years of writing. So every time I'm open to understand myself more and more, I would never stop learning about myself, and I would never stop go through the journey of career development. And there is a lot of career decisions that I made in my life. First of all, selecting my major in university. I went to university for electrical engineering. That's my aim. And I got bad advice, but it worked for me. Really bad advice from my cousin, but it worked good for me. He told me, Muath, listen, engineering is tough. We are suffering in engineering. Go to the management. It's easier. You'll have fun. And because of that, I made that decision. I went to management school, business school, and that worked well for me because I'm into that area. Also, when I worked for Saudi Aramco, for 4 years, and then I went through a change to open an organization, then going back to the market, and then establishing a lot of career decisions that I made in my life. And in each decision, I still learn something about myself, and I think I will learn more about myself in the future. So having someone to talk to and listen to and also learn from is something that is significant and is affecting everyone's life, and also me. بالعربي طيب بالعربي أنا قلت إنه أنا مريت بتجارب كثيرة في مجال التطوير المهني، ولا زلت استكشف نفسي، ولا زلت مستمتع باستكشاف نفسي، ولا زلت اظن انها رحله بتكون مستمره الى فتره زمنيه طويله، ومفروض كل واحد فيكم برضه هنا تستمر رحله استكشاف المهني بالنسبه له الى حتى يتقاعد او لا يتوفاه الله، حتى ممكن بعد التقاعد لو هذا متقاعد ولا زال ايضا يمر برحله تطوير مهني ويحاول يستكشف نفسه ايضا. فرحله استكشاف الذات مستمره ودائما اتعلم عن نفسي اشياء جديده. قبل 10 سنوات انا كنت اظن اني احب الكتابه. كنت أكتب كتابات كانت رائعة جدا، وكنت أظن إنه أنا من الناس اللي يعشقوا الكتاب يحبوها. بعد 10 سنوات لما أخذت البرنامج إعداد المرشدين مع أستاذ أحمد، قاعد أسوي انعكاس ذاتي على اللي كنت أسويه قبل في حياتي. واحد من الأشياء هي فترة الكتابة من 2008 ل 2012 وأنا أكتب، اللي يعني بسني وعمري يعرفوا في الانترنت كان في منتديات كتابية، كنا نكتب ونجاوب على بعض وكنت أكتب فيها. بعدين جلست إني أحلل فترة الكتابة. فترة الكتابة بالنسبة لي كانت في اليوم الواحد أقل من 20 دقيقة أو 20 دقيقة، وكنت أتعب بعدها، أشعر بتعب. بينما أنت لو تحب شيء تسوي شيء تحبه أنت المفروض ما تتعب. فكيف أنا كنت أحب الكتابة وكنت أتعب من الكتابة؟ بعدين اكتشفت إنه اللي كان يحببني في الكتابة مش الكتابة بحد ذاتها، هو الانعكاس الذاتي أو خلينا نقول الفيدباك أو آراء الناس الإيجابية اللي كانت تشوفها كتاباتي. هي اللي تخليني اعزز هذا السلوك واقعد اكتب واكتب واكتب. هذا شيء كتبته بعد 10 سنوات. دائما نستكشف انفسنا، وفي قرارات كثير في حياتي مرينا فيها كانت بسبب انه يعني التطوير المهني كان جدا اساسي وضروري يكون معك كوتش يساعدك.
Dr. Rich, question for you, and it seems from a very overloaded employee. What are the behavioral tricks an employee can adapt to feel positive or to create positive energy towards his job or work?
So repeat the first part again, please.
What are the behavioral tricks? This is the translation, the exact one, that an employee can adapt to feel or to empower himself with positive energy towards his job or career. It seems not the career, it's the job, it's work.
Well, I immediately go back to something Brian taught me yesterday, which was to slow down. Slow down and center on what's not working, what is working. And I think it was about breaking into parts. I'll try to recall this. When we take anything that's heavy on us, let's take it being a difficult loss or a bad work situation, slow down and think about what are the parts to that. And recognize it's not all of that at one time, break it into pieces, break it into parts. And then find a way to not judge yourself as being total of anything, total good or bad or overwhelmed. Right now, this is not working well, but this is working well. And I go home and I get peace with my family, or I go exercise. But not to globalize that work is so overwhelming, I have no capacity to make a good life or change over. I tend to globalize. If things are bad, I think all things are bad. We need to break it into parts. And by breaking it into parts, we can focus the energy that's appropriate to my bad management. And use energy that I have to go home and treat my wife and my child well. And also learn to somehow understand the needs of the boss. And try to get some way to understand why it's not going well. Or think about what they're going through. what their needs are. When things are overwhelming for me, I feel pressure to be different. And in many cases, I want to spend some energy, why is it happening? What's the pressure of the person what they're going through? I generally think people are good people. And they're also pressured and may not slow it down and break into parts as well. So I think the notion of when I can empathize with the difficulty of the person that may be affecting me negatively, that gives me a chance to understand the situation. Secondly, there are some mean people who haven't learned good behavior. And we have to find a way to continue to get our exercise outside or to tolerate it. There's a wonderful book called The Hairball. And the hairball is all the busyness, the intertwinedness of bad companies or organizations. And they say, learn how to orbit the hairball. Not to get so sucked in that we lose any sense of who we are. We just have to tolerate it as best we can and get our energy from outside the orbit. Not a good answer, because it's so highly contextualized and personal. But I mainly want to help the individual feel some power that they don't lose who they are, and to separate themselves from the hairball as best they can.
السؤال كان لدكتور ريتش هي برجاء ما هي الحالة السلوكية التي يمكن أن يتبعها الموظف للإحساس بالطاقة الإيجابية تجاه عمله؟ ورد دكتور ريتش بناء على السيشن اللي حصلت امبارح مع دكتور براين، وكان في نصيحتين اتكلموا فيها. ان اول حاجه كل واحد اول ما يحس بالضغط او بالطاقه السلبيه في مكان عمله لازم يوقف نفسه، يبطئ التراك اللي بيجري فيه ويفكر هل ده صح ولا لا، هل ده مناسب ولا لا. ربما يكون في نوع من بيئات العمل اللي فيها الطاقه السلبيه عاليه وتاثيرها السلبي على الموظف كانسان تاثير مدمر، وبالتالي انا دايما لازم يكون عندي انا الميزان اللي اقدر اوزن بيه.
بالنسبه للضغوطات والتعامل مع ضغوطات شخص مضغوط في العمل او الدوام ومع ذلك، في شيء لازم يضع في باله، انه يعني شيء انا استخدمه كطريقه يعني حتى انها تكون بالنسبه لي مريحه نفسيا، انه هذه حالة مؤقتة أنا حمر فيها، إنه هذه مو حياتي طول عمري. This is not my life. This is not what I will be doing the rest of my life. So it's a temporary condition that I'm going through. This somehow gives me a relief. Okay, this is a temporary situation that I have to deal with right now, but it's not the whole of my life or the rest of my life. هذه الحالة في البداية كده تخليني أول شيء استوعب إنه هي تحدي بالنسبة لي، فبالتالي أنا باخذ أقصى فائدة من هذه الأشياء، حتى الضغوطات اللي هي لها علاقة بالعمل أو الدوام مع ذلك تصبر شخصيتنا بطريقة ما، نكتسب فيها أشياء عن أنفسنا بطريقة ما. ودائما يعني أنا بالنسبة لي آخذ موضوع إنه الضغوطات هذه اللي نمر نحن فيها في حياتنا هي مفيدة بالنسبة لنا. مين هنا فيكم يعرف يطبخ؟ Who is here is a good chef or cook? No, okay, no. طبعا تعرفوا قدر الضغط انتم صح؟ طب احد يقول لي قدر الضغط ده ليه؟ قدر الضغط تستخدم في ايه؟
حلة الضغط، حلة بريستو.
الاستواء سلام، الاستواء السريعة. فبالنسبة لنا هذا الضغط اللي تمر فيها في الدوام هي ايضا تسقلك بشكل اسرع، بشكل اكبر. فانت تحاول تاخذ اعتبار انه هذا بالنسبه لك فرصه بهذا الشكل، صح انت نفسيا قد تكون متالم، صح انه صعوبات تكون تحدي بالنسبه لك، بس اعتبرها فرصه بالنسبه لك انك انت تصبر فيها مهارات وتستفيد منها. وبعدين تتعامل فيها زي ما قال دكتور براين بالطريقه اللي قالها، هذه طريقه التعامل. بس انا يهمني المايند سيت او العقليه اللي انت قاعد تتعامل فيها مع هذا الوضع، انها بتفرق معك كثير كيف تنظر للامور. The perspective that you are looking into at the situation will make a difference somehow in my opinion. So this is how I see it.
شكرا معاذ. في أي أسئلة تحبوا توجهوها محمد؟ اتفضل.
Just regarding this question, so you have
the booking press to حل.
the overloaded employee. So do you have any ideas or insights on how to integrate career development for corporates into other HR initiatives like the performance management and succession planning.
Well, I think we heard from our friends from the Emirates, I think, talking about learning and development is a big piece of that. So learning development and career development, I think there's some good crossover there. There's a wonderful book out now from Marcus Buckingham, and it's called Love and Work. It's just relatively new. I think that may be a place to go. And he talks about people don't want feedback, they want attention. They want attention. And feedback that's corrected is usually not taken very well. It's we want attention to know what do we do well and how do we maximize more of it. Performance reviews don't seem to work very well, but it's part of the hairball, it's part of the standardization of trying to give out generalized, standardized feedback. And I think what I'm learning from that, as I try to understand it better, is take a child who's acting out in your family, try to make this more personal. You can try to yell at the child, you can try to take away what they care about. It usually doesn't work very well. It's somehow finding a way that we trust each other, and you know that my questions and my feedback are in your best interest. When I think you're trying to give me feedback or performance review that's not in my best interest, I pretty much don't hear it. And again, I think it gets back to, how do I show you that you have value and that what you do has value? There's a difference between me trying to say you're wonderful and you're good. I want to know that I have value as a human being, but what I do has value. And if the value is not connected to the objectives of my colleague over here who talk about her organizations, there's a disconnect. So I have to know what the outcomes are that she's using, so I know what degree I have value for her goals. The other thing I would say about managers and I would say about pressured employees, if you all could follow me, would you please take your hands like this? In life, in the pressure of an employee who's stressed is basically they're wanting a vision, they want something, go high. But to go high, and I stay low with the reality and my hurt and pain and not, it's gonna stress. And that stress becomes worse and worse until that elastic band finally breaks. And that's an employee who commits suicide or goes home and beats their partner. Or it's a manager who has a heart attack or doesn't do well. On the other hand, if this is what I'm trying to get and I can continually get support to get closer to that vision, there's less tension. Or if I have a vision here and I give it up too quickly to fit in, I get rid of the tension, but I've lost my vision. And I think the relationship of my life and how I live every day is an elastic band. What do I want and what's the reality? And when I work with employees or bosses who don't treat me well, they're trying to get something that's against my reality. There's going to be natural tension. And I have to learn more about how do I get to my vision, or how do I bring it down to the reality. It's not easy stuff, but that tension will break. We are like an elastic band. Is that any value?
One last question actually for you, Dr. Rich. Yes, back to you again. Did you apply career development on your son? Did you coach him or counsel him?
I love telling this story, and I'll not take long, and I'll be very self-disclosing. I have only one child. I was told I couldn't have children, so we were in adoption, and he came along, so he was a gift to us. And he lived an upper-class life with lots of privilege. And we knew to try to help him get mastery, to try to travel, to be with people who were not like him, to be in an environment that would allow him to feel that he had hope, that he felt he made a difference in the world. That was our goal. So he did quite well through school, college, and athletics. And he had made a very bad decision. And the decision involved an accident on a boat. And a boy got hurt very badly. And my son went to jail. I've not told that to many audiences. So when your son goes to jail, you question yourself. The good news of this is that my son went to jail, took responsibility, was able to keep his head clear, and came out with, I think, a real appreciation for what his parents had tried to demonstrate to him. Fortunately, he finished college, went to take a job that wouldn't keep asking him about going to jail. He then went to a boot camp to give him more technical skills. He's a data scientist. He then went and got a graduate degree as well. He's now 31, and he works for the National Basketball Association, makes all of the trades for the New York Knicks. That may not mean much to you, but what it means is, as the 4-year-old, we tried to give him a sense of mastery, a sense of believing in himself, a reason to build social capital, to be humble, to recognize that people make mistakes. He made a difficult mistake. He went to prison, lost 25 pounds in 40 days. But the resilience, his ability to see it differently, that resilience, he made choices about what it meant. He was able to go back to graduate school, to learn that graduate school caused him to want to learn more technical skills and master what we thought we taught him. A side story. And this is why I'm on a mission to talk about aptitudes. I was co-author of a popular interest inventory that sold 20 million copies. I began to see that the word passion was not a good word, and that we were silently tracking people chasing their interests without giving them feedback about their natural aptitudes, the way their natural gifts always showed up and did not let them down. My son, during this period, took our aptitude test, and we found out 2 things that he had never been told. He had amazing sequential reasoning, amazing. And he had really good numerical reasoning. Those 2 aptitudes are critical to being a data scientist. We missed all of that because we never gave them that feedback. I then said to myself, that's why interests are helpful, but not enough. And have spent my life trying to raise attention to the power of those aptitudes that always show up and give you more opportunity to find flow, to chase your interests that will change. So my son is a case study of someone who got good information, made a mistake, paid a heavy price, got new feedback about some amazing aptitudes we had missed that allowed him to now prosper. And I say that in making myself very vulnerable to tell you about his accident, because I think each one of us will trip. We will fall. We will make a mistake. And we never can give up on people. We need to give them new feedback. And hopefully they understand that they have more in common with people than difference. And all of us will go to jail in some way. If not, as my son did, they go to jail in their heads. And they don't think they have potential, or they're not good enough, or they're not worthy enough, or they don't have a right to be treated well. I'm not sure that answered you, but it's a very personal statement of the most important person in my life who had a bump in the road, was given support by a community, got new feedback, and prospered, knowing he every day has to navigate new transitions, and he will have another bump in the road, just like you and I.
كان السؤال الأخير لدكتور ريتش عن تجربته الشخصية مع ابنه، وهل مارس الكارير ديفلوبمنت كوتشنج أو التوجيه والإرشاد المهني مع ابنه. طبعا هو حاجة تفاصيل إن عن ابنه وإزاي هو كان شوية تايه عن عيلته، أو بمعنى أصح ما كانش لاقي نفسه، وللأسف من ضمن الأخطاء اللي تمت في حياته شويه تاه عن الطريق لكن رجع مره ثانيه، وكان بسبب اداه القياس لمهاراته او لشخصيته او لبعض جوانب الشخصيه بتاعته عرفوا انه يقدر يشتغل الحاجه اللي بيحبها. فابن دكتور ريتش فعلا طلع محظوظ كفايه ان حاليا هو بيشتغل في مجال هو بيحبه ومناسب لنمط الشخصيه بتاعه. ف he's lucky actually. He's very lucky, your son.
I think he's lucky, but I don't like that word.
Okay.
Because the word suggests something external happened. I think he was fortunate to have a social support system, and he was also lucky to have parents who could afford good lawyers. No minor thing. And he also was fortunate because he had learned to take reframing. He could be resilient. He had those qualities we talked about because he had support from a community that taught him career development. Luck makes me a little nervous because we give people false hope. So I like the word fortunate.
تمام. في اي اسئله تحبوا توجهوها للاستاذ معاذ بن حسين او لدكتور ريتش فيلر؟ شكرا ليك يا فندم. شكرا ليك يا فندم. It's in Arabic. We're saying شكرا. شكرا جزيلا. شكرا.